I'll start in 30 seconds, write down the focus question. And then if you want to write down the do now, if you know what a credit card is or how a credit card works, please let me know. All right, guys, let's get started because it's a short period and we want to get through as much as we can. So yesterday we talked about the women's rights movement. The day before that we talked about prohibition. Remember the Roaring 20s, we just jump from topic to topic. Every day is something new, but there's two consistencies. It's all centered around change and it's all centered in the 1920s. So we're going to see how this new style of paying for things leads to a big economic boom, meaning the economy does very well. But ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, you will see it becomes an absolute disaster later on. So the focus question is, how did installment buying lead people to believe they're richer than they actually were? Okay? So the do now is write in the chat, what does it mean when a person pays with a credit card? So I'll give you 30 seconds. Does anyone know how a credit card works or how it differs from cash if you were to pay with cash or pay with a debit card? Anyone know? I know you guys probably aren't paying for too many things, especially out with a credit card. Okay, they have to pay at the end of the month, right? You could use money you don't have. Okay, so cool. So when you pay with a credit card, you are not actually paying for something right there and then. You're actually kind of taking out a little bit of a loan on credit, and basically you're going to pay it back later, sometimes at the end of the month, like Muhammad says. So let's say I have cash on me or I have my debit card. A debit card and cash pretty much work identically. So if I have $1,000 in my bank account and I buy something that's $10, okay, I now have $990 in my bank. If I use a credit card and I have $1,000 in my bank account, I still have $1,000 in my bank account, at least for a short while. All right, so many people, okay, are essentially throughout the 1920s going to use like the first ever credit cards, except there weren't actual credit cards. They were what's called installment buying. Okay, so what's going to happen is in the 1920s, people are going to want to start to buy a lot more expensive things. It's called consumer culture. And they want to buy more expensive things, but a lot of people don't have the money right there and then to do it. Okay, now this is partially a lesson to learn about the Roaring 20s, but also a lesson for you guys in your future because you guys will be installment buying. You guys will be using credit cards when you get older. So it's kind of good to know how the process works, all right, as you go through this. All right, so please copy now what's in red. All right, the new way to pay for things. All right, with so many new goods being invented, okay, we are going to see some new goods, but we've already saw through the industrial era how there's all these new technologies being invented, electricity, right? People wanted to buy these new items. However, people did not have enough money. All right. Now, you're not copying the next thing down, but this is just kind of a good point. After World War I, our country does move to isolationism, but we do move a little bit more back to laissez-faire. You're going to learn this because the two presidents at the time were small government Republicans. What that means is they didn't really want to get too involved in the economy at this point. All right. So this is very similar to like they did during industrialization. And because of this, because the government's not too involved, the stock market, the stock economy is going to rise. Okay? So when the country is doing pretty well, all right, when the country is doing pretty well, we are going to give people the opportunity to buy more things. This should make sense. The more money you have, the more things you could buy. Okay, and the more things you buy, the better that helps out our economy. But we're going to introduce a new way to buy things, and this is called installment buying. All right, installment buying is essentially, like I said already, very similar to buying with a credit card. Okay, and we're gonna practice and show you how this kind of works. All right, so basically, what's going to happen is when you installment buy, you're going to go to a place. Okay, you're going to say, you know what, I don't have the money for this object right now. Okay, the object we're going to look at today is a car. All right, but let's say you don't have enough money to, get a car. You want to get a $20,000 car, but you only have $5,000 in your bank account. Okay, well, the way we go about this is buying on credit. Okay, and this is something you guys are going to have to get used to doing. When you buy a house, when you go to college, when you buy a car, it's very likely you won't have the money to pay for it on your own. Okay, very rarely anyone does. So you have to get used to buying things on credit, and you have to know how the process works. You have to know what you're really buying, because a lot of people in the 1920s, you're going to learn, didn't realize this. All right, so let's look at how installment buying works. Now, I know it's social studies class, but we are going to be looking at how to do a little math problem here. All right, so if you can, go to the Google Classroom and click on the document on the left. All right. The document on the left is practicing what it's like to installment buy. Now, we can practice this like we're living in 1925, or we can practice this like we're living in 2021. You should see the process of how to buy a car. Okay, you should see the process how to installment buy. You should see the process on how to buy on credit. Because in the 1920s, people did it, but didn't really understand it. And this would lead to a huge problem in our country in the 1930s. Okay, some of you guys already maybe know what that is. Okay, so let's see how we buy a car in a very overly simplistic way. All right, so let's take a look here. We have an example here. So you have a new car. Okay, the cost of a new car is $14,000. You can pay $280 down. So that's what's known as the down payment. And then you're going to finance the rest of it for $315 per month for 60 months. So basically, it's like you can afford to pay $280 for the car now. And then over time, every month, you're going to pay a little bit more to pay it back. These are what's known as bills. All right, so what we want to actually figure out here is, if you had $14,000 in your bank account and you could pay the car off for $14,000, that's great. But we're going to pretend like we don't. So we want to figure out how much this car is actually worth when we finance it or when we installment buy it or we buy it on credit. Okay, because there's always this thing called interest. Okay. So let's use the chat here. We're going to break down each one. If you want to use a calculator, you can. If you want to use a pen, you can. Whatever's fine. You're going to take the cash price and subtract the down payment. What is the first solution? What is the cash price minus the down payment? So you should be doing the price of the car minus the down payment. You can unmute yourself, or you can tell me what that number is, and we will fill it in. What is the cash price minus the down payment? Take the price of the car and subtract the down payment. You guys didn't think you were doing math today. I always got to be ready. Okay, perfect. So 14,000 minus 280, you're going to get 13,720. Okay. So now we're going to take that number, 13,720. We got to understand that's the amount of money that we owe to buy this car. So when we pay that $280, guess what? We now own that car, but we owe the bank. Okay, the bank is the one who's going to be giving out the loan. We owe the bank $13,720. Now, since we can't pay that right away, we have to come up with an installment price. So let's take the monthly payment amount, okay, see in the example what that is, times the number of payments, the number of months. Okay, you're going to multiply those together, and then you're going to add the down payment to that. So it should be $315 times 60, and then you add the $280 toward that. Please tell me what you got for that answer. What do we get for that answer? Get those calculators out if you can't do it. Mia got it. Good job, Mia. $19,180. Okay, so that's not how much the car is worth now. Okay, over time, we got to figure out, okay, some more things. So the next step, the finance charge. You're going to take the total installment price, which is this number. So I'm just going to literally copy and paste it. Okay, and then we want to subtract the original price of the car. Okay, so what do we get when we take the total installment price and subtract the price of the car? What does that equal? $5,180. Okay, so here's what we do here. We're going to take box 2's number, and we're going to take box 3's number. Okay, we're going to take the finance charge plus the total installment price. So we're going to take 5,180 plus 19,180, and you get what? $24,000. Thank you, Jessica. All you guys participated. Thank you. $24,360. Okay, so the price of the car, if you pay it all right away, is $14,000. If you pay it over 5 years or 60 months, it really costs $24,360. Okay, so people in the Roaring 20s didn't understand this. They just assume, oh my God, I could buy a car for $280. They didn't realize they're actually spending an extra $10,000 on the car. Okay, so many people were buying things that they actually couldn't afford. Okay, which is a horrible, horrible thing. All right, so let's go back to the notes here. All right, go to this one here. So we're just going to introduce, okay, we're going to introduce the stock market, because ultimately the stock market works in a very similar way. Okay, so during the 1920s, you have what's called stock market, and you've had it before, you still have it now. So basically there's a situation where companies have the option to be what's called publicly owned or publicly traded. That means everyday people can own stocks of a company. All right, so if you take a company like Apple, let's say, it's a publicly owned company. So if Mr. Panio wants to buy a share of the stock, okay, I can buy a share of the stock. And if the company does well, the stock price goes up, therefore I make money. If the stock goes down and the company does bad, well, then I lose money. So it's a high risk, high reward type of thing. You could win money, you could lose money. Okay, so during the 1920s, the stock market is booming. All of these companies are getting all of these people to buy all of these products because everyone's installment buying. Now, they really can't afford it, okay? But for a short time, people are buying all of these products, and they're what's called accumulating debt. And then you know what people start to do? They don't just buy products, they buy money in the stock market. Okay, this is known as buying on margin. They do it the same way. So very similar to installment buying. People pay a short percentage of a stock, 10% of a stock, and they're going to pay for the rest of the stock back once the price rises. Okay, so let's say a stock costs $1,000. You pay $100 for it. Okay, once the stock price rises past $1,000, you're going to pay back the person you owe, and then every profit you make after that, okay, you're going to keep. The problem is, okay, the stock market, as you'll see soon, sometimes goes up, sometimes goes down. Okay, so sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, but in the 1920s, it's just going up. Things are going great. All right, so installment buying and buying on margin in the 1920s and the roaring 20s leads to be called consumer culture. We're used to this today where people buy products that they want, not necessarily what they need from industries. Like you don't need that video game. You don't need that cell phone. Okay, but it is available for you to buy. So many people get the opportunity to buy those things because they're making good money. All right, if you want a car, if you want a house, okay, these are very expensive things. You're going to use installment buying to do it, and then you have to pay your bills back. All right, let's take a look here. There's one big problem with buying on margin. The stock market doesn't always go up. You could see it goes down a little, it goes up, it goes down, it goes up, and then it goes very high, and then it sometimes crashes. Okay, this would be a huge reason why the Great Depression happens. Now, you guys in the 6th grade learned about the Great Depression a little bit. Okay, you guys learned about the Great Depression a little bit. All right, you should maybe remember that the stock market crash was a huge reason why the Great Depression happened. But the truth is, it wasn't just the stock market crashing that caused the Great Depression. It was actually a small detail. The reason that the Great Depression happened was there was so many people buying stocks. There were so many people buying products, and they owed so much money. They paid $280 for a car, not realizing they owed over $24,000 for it. All right, so people were basically buying things they could not afford, and this became a big, big problem. Now, if Mr. Panio wants to go and buy a $3 million house, I have to get a loan from the bank. The bank is going to say, you know what, Mr. Panio, you're a teacher. You can't afford that $3 million house. We're not going to give you that loan. But in the 1920s, everyone got a loan. Everyone was able to buy on credit. Everyone was able to installment buy, even people that didn't have jobs. So people were literally buying things they could not afford. And then what happened was, not to get too far ahead, eventually when you can't afford things and you fall in a lot of debt, okay, the economy, the government can't handle that. Okay, so you got to make sure when you buy things in your future, you could really afford it. If you are working a job and you have $1,000 in your bank account, you shouldn't be buying a $6,000 phone. Okay, you just shouldn't. Okay, you can't afford it. Even if you only get it for $400, you're going to eventually have to pay that back, and it's going to cost you more money to pay it back, which is a big problem. All right, we're going to do something a little bit differently today. I'm going to give you 2 Regents questions that you're going to do from the Google form here. Just 2 of them. So instead of writing in the chat, let's do it this way. Just change it up a little bit. All right, so everyone right now, take a look at the chat. People say it's expensive to be poor. I know what you mean. Everyone take a look at the chat, and you're going to answer the 2 Regents questions. Just write your name, and let's practice this. All right, let's try these 2 questions. I'll give you a minute to do it. All right, take a minute. This will be part of your assignment today. You could write this down. Click the 2 questions. Which economic factor was a major cause of the Great Depression? During the 1920s, which economic trend helped cause the Great Depression? That's another one too. I got some responses. All right. Since we only have 4 minutes left, I will take a look at those responses shortly. Let's go back. We have just one more quick slide of notes. Okay. And then this is going to help you with the assignment. Okay. So I've already kind of alluded to this already, but because so many people were able to buy on credit, because so many people were able to buy on margin and installment buy, this is the first time where pretty much the new cool technology was going to be a car. Now, cars have been around since like the 1870s, 1880s, but like no one could afford them. They were so incredibly expensive, okay? That is until the 1910s, the 1920s, where the car becomes the technology that everyone is able to afford. Why are they able to now afford it? Well, there's two reasons. One of which, people now are going to installment buy. That's number one. Number two, Henry Ford, the leader of Ford Motor Company, found a way to mass produce cars. Now, making cars are so incredibly hard to do. You have to be extremely smart. You have to be extremely good with your hands. So people that used to make cars used to be like these geniuses, okay? And they're very hard to find. It was such a very hard job. Henry Ford says, you know what? We got to scrap that. We got to find easier and more efficient ways to make cars, okay? And the way he's going to do this is he's going to use what's called the assembly line. The assembly line is a way, okay, the assembly line is a way to get a lot of different people to build a certain product. Okay, so if you look here in this photo here, okay, he's gonna have a bunch of different workers working together to help build the car. So this lady, we'll start down here on the right side. There's a man there they're working on tires. The first person, maybe he's putting the rubber on the tire. The next person's maybe putting the nuts on the tire. The next person's probably putting the bolts and tightening the tire. And it just goes down the assembly line. Every single person has one job to do to help build an entire car. So instead of saying, Mr. Panio, we need you to build this entire car, they're going to say, Mr. Panio, you need to build the tire of this car. Okay, you need to build the steering wheel of this car. Okay, and this process is known as the assembly line, where each worker does one task towards the completion of a finished product. Henry Ford made sure his workers put only one piece of the car together, then passed it along to the next worker. This allowed him to hire workers that weren't as educated. This allowed him to hire people that didn't speak the language, because they got very used to just doing one job. And that eventually led to his most famous vehicle. You'll see this photo here. It's called the Model T. All right. Now, because it's such a short period, you guys would usually have 10 to 20 minutes to do this. But since we don't, you guys are going to work on today's assignment, which is the Henry Ford Model T assignment. So if you click on that, okay, you should see it come up here. All right, you can open it with a Google Doc and answer the questions. There is a total of 6. Okay, so go through and answer the 6 questions. You guys should become experts on the Model T. All right, my 8A1 and 8C1, I'm sorry it was such a short period, but that's how third period is. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good rest of your day.